Alright guys, welcome back to VALORANT News. Massive drama around the world of VALORANT today with huge playoff games going down around the world. But certainly in the Pacific, after the coach drama between Chet and Demon 1 that we saw in the Americas, we now have more coach drama going down in the Pacific. Big results as well last night with G2 versus Sentinels. Once again, the finale of the Americas. Very much enjoyed your thoughts on all this stuff in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. We are going to begin in China. Wolves Esports versus Bilibili Gaming. And this was a 3-0 smoke show. It wasn't an absolute demolition job, but it was very impressive from BLG. So Wolves, they'd made it, and they still will be there, of course, in Toronto. But BLG put themselves in a great position, right? I mean, look, they took down Edward Gaming. That is no mean feat at all in this region. They won the second game on the Lotus 13-11 after coming back from an 8-4 deficit in the first half still to win it. And then it was 13-7. So, yeah, pretty tough for Wolves. They played 3 reasonably good maps, and they just fell short in the end. But Huzi on the icebox had 24 in 12 to get the job done, right? So, yeah, BLG advanced to the finals, and those finals, if I hit the refresh, are currently looking like this. So XLG have just taken the first map. The second map on the Lotus is being pretty competitive right now. Actually, yeah, that fracture was 50-13, not bad at all. Huzi tried his best on the Neon, but it wasn't going to be good enough in the end. So, yeah, this series continues. Of course, the champions of the Chinese region, pretty big deal, right? Whoever wins it. Kind of crazy to look at the stage in the region to say, I mean, look, we've talked about the franchises over the last couple of years that have been the big forces in the region. It's been Edward Gaming. It's been at times FPX, right? And of course, Bilibili have been there. Trace Esports were there at the start of the season. Many of these names, I think, you know, some might have put ahead of the likes of Bilibili, Wolves, and GLI Gaming, but no, XLG and Bilibili, those are the two teams that will be there. And still right now, XLG continue to kind of press home that advantage. So excited to see how this series concludes. This is the trophy, by the way, for, you know, VCT Stage 1, which is absolutely mega. So, yeah, I'm sure the team who wins it in a very short amount of time is going to enjoy lifting up that one. Now, FNS is back. The watch parties are back after all the NRG drama over the last couple of days. I thought it was just quickly kind of interesting. I found a tweet here. Let me see if I can actually find it real quick. From Ethan, it was in replies to Mike's, because of course we saw Mike's tweet out about it was like the hardest thing that he's ever done in esports pretty much, and there were lots of questions on what the differences were in terms of vision for the team. Whether it's, you know, FNS, Ethan, Som running the show over there, I wouldn't be massively surprised. But Ethan does actually reply and say, "Thank you, Mike. It was really fun working with you for the short time we had. Learned a lot from you as a coach. Sorry things weren't in a good spot when you joined. We didn't get the results while you were here." So, this, you know, that's pretty interesting, I thought. Sorry that we weren't in a good spot when you joined, because that certainly implies that all the drama in recent times, the Bonkar stuff, the Verno stuff, whatever the changes, have affected Mike's ability to execute, which, to be honest, makes a fair bit of sense, I suppose. So there is that. But the other thing, of course, is FNS being back in business because NRG are gone, and therefore he gets to do the watch parties, and we saw some examples of that last night. Talon took down Nongshim in the end, which was, yeah, big result for them. And I will just say, we'll discuss the DRX series in a second, so we're going to have a little bit of a spoiler for that. But this is VALORANT heritage and continues to be. They beat GE, lost to T1, beat Nongshim, lost to Gen.G, and it's kind of unfortunate that Nongshim always tended to have played Talent in the odd series, so they just always lose. I mean, it's actually insane how Talent will just alternate wins and losses, and they did it again today. But Nongshim go down. They, of course, out of the playoffs run. But the other series in the Pacific yesterday, this was the big one, right? And it's so fascinating to me how this T1 team started the year so strong. I was really high on them early on, and for good reason, clearly. They turned up to Bangkok. They won the whole thing. Since then, they looked a bit shakier, and now they've really fallen down dramatically. And it's a big question whether they can really turn up again from here. Their executes, their holds looked pretty terrible. You know, you got to always wonder whether when you win a tournament in the manner that they did, whether some sort of, you know, complacency is always a word that gets thrown around, but it's just really difficult to stay at the top. But Paper Rex, man, they're doing it. They're building it track by track. It's people are talking about a lot at the moment, right? So, you know, Paper Rex get the 2-1 win. Salt to the earth, VALORANT. They lost the map 1 13-3. I mean, like, it was a wild series, really. I mean, something had one frag, map 1. on the Fracture. And then after that, Paper X just slammed them. I mean, it's one of the most confusing series you're ever going to see. Paper X on their Fracture pick gets smoked 13-3 to then smoke T1 on their Ascent pick 13-4. And then slam them even worse on the Lotus Decider. Like, so confusing, but highly deserved for Paper X. T1 have not been at the races this stage at all, and Paper X, they advance on in the bracket. How far can they go? That's a big question. We'll see the bracket in a couple of minutes' time. But before we get there, we've got to talk about this drama that's been happening in the Pacific today. And that is between a couple of the coaches. So here we go. This is what happened today. We had Talon on the right-hand side versus DRX. And we'll see the result in a second. But, and look, there was a bit of talk about refusing the handshake and all this. And there was a question mark on whether we would get anything between these two. Because, just to paint a little bit of the picture behind this story, there have been lots of rumours and discussions from Frost especially that in the Pacific region there is lots of scrim sharing, let's say, going on when certain teams will scrim another team and they will reveal those results of the scrims, or let's just say the compositions the team is using, to their friends on other teams to potentially give them an advantage. This has been a big rumour. I mean, look, this is done. I'm certain that this is done. We'll even see some evidence of it in a second. Who's been doing it? That's a different question, but Frost has been on record to say that, you know, he thinks this Termy guy has wronged him in multiple ways, such as in this way. So he decides to look him in the eyes and not fist bump him, not shake his hands, not show any respect, and Termy gives him like a hell of a death stare right here. But, you know, Frost looks away, claps his hands and says, yep, good luck team. And, you know, he gives a thumbs up to the players to kind of say, look, nothing against you guys necessarily, but clearly something against the coach. So, you know, very spicy, real spicy stuff, and a few things to share really before we talk about the game. I mean, I saw this tweet going around here from Fade, who's a coach for Wolves, and he says, unfortunately, scrim sharing happens way more often than you can imagine. I've even experienced it against my team before. This screenshot was given by a coach that got approached by another team's coach a couple of days before our match. And, you know, this guy does this thumbs up and says, can we be a scrim partner? Also, I can share about next match I sent to whoever before if you need. So, you know, clearly this type of stuff is happening here. And there was a couple of tweets actually from Jess I thought were pretty interesting. Look, I know people are crashing out over this. At the end of the day, this is just good trash talk in my opinion, right? Like, obviously these guys don't like each other. Frost feels like this guy's disrespected him in the past, so he's going to disrespect him back. Like, it's sports, baby. You know, it is what it is. I've got no issue with this at all. I think it's entertaining, and it added a bit of spice to the match. Now, of course, because Talon went on to lose, people are going to say, oh, Frost has been clowned, like, show some respect, clown, or whatever, and that's certainly what DRX said after the series, but, you know, I think it's fine either way. Now, Jess in the reply said something pretty interesting. It's not as surface level as people claim when Frost has dealt with that coach sharing his VODs and making comments about his mother, which I thought was interesting. I've actually not heard about this before. So, you know, look, I don't know what was said. I don't know what context it was said. I'm just sharing what's been put out there on the timeline today. At what point do we forgive Frost for not wanting to be around or touch the man? And then, you know, this was actually probably the better graphic that I probably should have thrown on the thumbnail. But, I mean, this goes hard, right? This actually goes really hard. But this is the picture, and Jess says, yeah, this is going to be an iconic moment. He stood on stage and made a choice to not acknowledge someone who had wronged him multiple times. And at the end of the day, Frost actually did a tweet afterwards and say, look, this is, you know, to some degree, this was pretty good publicity for Frost's perspective, because as he says, for all the new people tuning into Pacific, you missed a ton last year. This region is very exciting. Continue supporting this league. I thought it was really rather nice. But look, the point is that Frost, by refusing the handshake, people are talking about it. People are talking about the scrim sharing, and all of a sudden, maybe Frost's intention, in terms of what he wanted to achieve out of this, has very much come true. Of course, at the end of the day, they still lost. They still got slammed. And look, this was probably inevitable, right? Where we've seen it. Talon simply alternate between winning and losing. This was a losing series, and they lost it. DRX slammed them in the end. 13-4 Icebox on Talon's pick. The Fracture actually went to an overtime. They could have potentially won this one, Talon. They gave it a good go in the second half, but in the end on the Fracture, just not quite enough, and DRX advanced on in the bracket. So, you know, fair play. I thought it was good beef, good driver of the day, as always. The rest of the Pacific now looks like this. So DRX, they have made it, right? They've made it all the way through to low round 3. but they're still one series away, right? This was the G2 Evil Geniuses series in the other game, and it may be DRX versus Paper X, or it may be DRX versus Boom. But early days, it's looking pretty good for Paper X. They're 7-2 up, and if they do go on to win this, Jing's currently having an absolute masterclass. They will play DRX in a few days' time to see who goes to Toronto and who does not. In the Americas, and this is DRX's tweet, by the way, get humbled, they say, manners maketh man, which I thought was, it's a good tweet, sure, but equally, Frost may argue that Termy's manners haven't been the best of whatever's happened behind the scenes, right? So I think that's the talking point really of the day. But the other big series of last night was MIBR versus G2. And it's very interesting because MIBR looked very impressive to get to this point, and then G2 turned up to the plate and they handled business. Again, MIBR had their opportunities in this series. What I think is interesting is Aspas is, he's on the Neon and he's on the Jet all of the time. Now, I'm not going to criticize Aspas exactly, right, because he's still Aspas, but there was a bit of talk about it, right, as the series went on, that maybe Yoru is worth some consideration rather than Jet. I mean, G2 eventually won the Lotus 15-13, the split was 13-10, and then the final map here on the Ascent, this was when there were conversations around whether other agents could have been viable instead, rather Aspas using the Jet. We will see, but at the end of the day, G2, they've done it again. They got over the line in a best of 5. It was honestly a really competitive series. MLBR still looking impressive, but G2 just that little bit too strong. They just have such a deep understanding of how to play the game, like teamwork-wise, clutching-wise, mid-rounding. Yeah, they still are just a little bit of a class above most of the other teams, although they were so very close to getting eliminated, of course, by Evil Geniuses, as we know. MRB are out, but they're still going to be in Toronto. G2, though, being top 2 minimum, that guarantees their passage to the World Cup, as we talked about a couple of days ago. MRBR can still make it, but it's not guaranteed, to my understanding, as it stands. And then the finals is going to be against Sentinels, so it doesn't get much better than that. Sentinels versus G2 to close out the stage. Who's going to win in the Americas? That is the big question right now. But it's been a banger Americas stint, really. And yeah, May the 4th, which is today, in 10 hours' time, we are going to have a champion in the Americas. So very much interested to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.